this video yesterday. My computer kind of had a minor spaz attack and it wasn't letting me like film anything or edit anything, and yeah, so I'll upload tourism later as well. So today I'm gonna do development. Yay, development. I've got the whole textbook somewhere, like the whole bit from a textbook, but you know, key points, keep it short. Hopefully I won't go off on any tangents because I just spent forever editing out my random tangents in the tourism, and then I kind of just lost the will to live, so there's probably still some at the end. So development is the use of human and natural resources to use a higher standard of living, and development can be measured using economic, social or environmental factors. Economic indicators for development relate to the income of the country, and their GDP, which is gross domestic product, which is the total value of the goods and services produced by a country in a year, and the GNI, which is gross national income. This is like GDP, but factors in income are also from overseas. To enable comparisons between countries, the GDP and GNI, two things can be done and are being done. GNI and GDP are expressed per capita, which is Latin for head, and it provides an average. It's the total income divided by the number of people in the country. GNI and GDP can also be seen as PPP, which is purchasing power parity. The GDP/GNI figure is adjusted to reflect the cost of living in particular countries. For instance, a dollar will buy you some more things in some countries than others. Essentially, the cost of living in LEDCs tends to be less, so the GNI/GDP figure is adjusted upwards to reflect this. The UN attempted to divide up the world based on income, which can be seen in this map, where green is high income, orange is upper middle income, purple is lower middle income, and yellow is low income. So as you can see, we're quite a good country. Yes. So social indicators are things like health, education and population. Things like life expectancy, adult literacy percentage, infant mortality and access to healthcare. They tell you about the lives of people in the country. Environmental indicators are often hard to quantify. They include indicators such as access to clean water, air pollution and sanitation systems. There is a link between GNI and social indicators. As you can see on this graph, the higher the GNI, the lower the birth rate. This is obviously because of education, contraception and things. And obviously in MEDCs it's often really expensive to look after children, and so they don't want to have loads because the cost of living is high. It's useful to look for correlation between two indicators because using one indicator alone is not entirely accurate. GNI does not show the distribution of wealth within a country. One person might own 99% of the wealth, you know, like an evil dictator, and the rest of the population could be really poor. Inequality can't be hidden in social factors like life expectancy or adult literacy. Therefore, it's best to examine a variety of indicators to gain an accurate picture. There's the Brandt model, by Willy Brandt, who's an ex-German chancellor. He devised this map in 1981. The Brandt line shows rich countries to the north and poor countries to the south. However, it is now deemed to be a little out of date as many things have changed. Since 1981, collapse of the old Soviet Union and rapid industrialization of places like South Korea and Mexico, which are newly industrialized countries or NICs, and the rise in wealth of places like oil exporting countries in the middle of these were not taken into account. Okay, so the Brandt line map is there, which is kind of really simple, and yeah. So the map devised by the World Bank and the UN, showing how they have classified the world based on 4 levels of income, is similar to the Brandt map, but more detailed and reflects more recent changes. The UN has also introduced a measure called HDI. The map for that is here. Basically, the best countries are Norway, Australia, and New Zealand, and the worst countries are Niger, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Zimbabwe. Standard of living refers to how much money people have. It's measured as GDP per capita. The map shows the proportion of people living on less than $1 PPP a day. So that's there, and that is a topological map or something. Larger than normal areas show a high number of people living on $1 a day. For example, India and Africa. Then look how tiny America is. They have a low standard of living. Quality of life refers to the general well-being of individuals or societies. Quality of life is a broader measure than standard of living because it encompasses standard of living, but also factors in social factors like life expectancy, education, and perhaps environmental factors. Quality of life can be measured using the Human Development Index, which is the HDI. It includes life expectancy, educational attainment and average number of years spent in school, and GDP per capita PPP. Each of the categories is given a score, and the HDI is the average of the scores. 0 is the worst score and 1 is the best score. The countries are then ranked in order from 1 the best and to 169 the worst. In Bhutan, culture and the environment are rated more highly than in the UK. In Kenya, the basics are more crucial than our priorities like mobile phones. Often people live in slums or shanty towns or informal settlements. These are unplanned and are invariably poor places to live. A lack of sanitation and disease are the main issues for living in a slum. However, things can be done to improve the situation in the slums in Nairobi in Kenya. So I'm not going to ramble on about my school yet. I'll do that in a minute. In Kiambu, Christian Aid has a partner called Majina Ufanisi, which is water and development. With MNU's help, the residents have built 5 toilet and shower blocks. Local people have been employed to clean and maintain them. A small fee is charged and the money is used to improve life further in the community. They also have clean drinking water, which has helped immensely. And in Mataponi, Catherine Kiafku has formed a group that organises rubbish collections and educates people about helping Mataponi. She hopes that the MSU will find the money to work with her community too. And in Korogocho, don't forget that Oakland's Catholic School and our links with CAFOD. This is very important. We raised money for a gym to improve the quality of life. It was like £17,000, I think. I don't know. I can't. So this is how much I care. I care about poor people. I just got enough CAFOD and then you kind of end up shutting it out. But they built a gym for the people in Korogocho. And we also raised money to send 175 children to school at St John's School. It's good to know all the money I've been giving to the school this year has gone somewhere good, isn't it? I think it's like £30 to send a child to school for a year. So there's been a lot of fundraising. Some areas are more developed than others due to environmental factors, social factors, economic factors and political factors. Environmental factors include things like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions and hurricanes. Poor countries tend to suffer badly from these as they lack the money to prepare and recover from them. In Honduras, there was Hurricane Mitch in 1998, which hit them hard as they were reliant on agriculture. In Honduras, the GNI per capita (PPP) is $3,750, and in the UK it's 36,130. The HDI in Honduras is 0.604, and in the UK it's 0.875. The HDI rank in Honduras is 106, and in the UK it's 26. The birth rate in Honduras is 26, and in the UK it's 11. The death rate, in fact, is exactly the same as Honduras and the UK, which is 5. Infant mortality in Honduras is, however, quite a lot higher. It's 22 in Honduras and 5 in the UK. Doctors per 1,000 is 0.6 in Honduras and 7.5 in the UK. Life expectancy in Honduras is 70, but in the UK it's 80. Adult literacy in Honduras is 80%, so it's not too bad, but in the UK it's 99%. And there's 59% of people living below the poverty line in Honduras compared to 20% in the UK. So Honduras relies heavily on selling coffee and bananas to bring in foreign income. So when the hurricane wiped out much of his crop, the effects were devastating. In Hurricane Mitch in Honduras, 5,000 people died, 70% of the crops were destroyed, 50% of all homes were destroyed, 300 kilometers of roads were wrecked, flooding and landslides, repair of damage was 2 to 3 billion. Honduras had no money to pay for reconstruction, and its economy was wiped out by the hurricane. 10 years on, temporary bridges are still being used. One has fallen down 3 times, and people have stolen the screws. There's still no national emergency plan, although $1 million was spent to deal with the impact of flooding and landslides, and 4 million people, which is 50% of the population, still live in vulnerable places. So the social factors inhibiting development are the fact that 768 million people in the world don't have access to a reliable water supply, which is roughly 1 in 10 of the population. A child dies from a waterborne disease every 15 seconds. So just think of that for a second. That's a lot of dead children in daily life. 12% of the world's population uses 85% of the water. And access to water has a direct link with standard of living. WaterAid is a charity. It's an NGO, and they try to improve life by providing safe water and sanitation. An example being in Meheri Abraha in Ethiopia. They can provide spring wells to ensure a clean water supply. If you don't have a reliable water supply, you don't waste time fetching water. You can then spend time focusing on economic activity, which leads to development. The same is true due to the clean water. People don't get ill and can focus on making money. Political factors can also limit development. In Zimbabwe, the HDI rank is 169, so it's the worst. Political decisions were made to redistribute land from the white farmers to the majority black population. However, many didn't have the experience to run the farms. The fragmentation of the farms meant that productivity fell, consequently the economy failed and people did not have food to eat. In Kenya, political unrest can mean tourists do not come as they do not feel safe. Their potential money is then lost. Equally, businesses are unlikely to invest in such countries, which could prevent further development. Economic factors can also limit development. The problem comes with trade and the fact that many manufactured goods that Kenya requires come from abroad, and these are often high in value. Therefore, the money going out of the country to pay for these items is less than that coming in for agricultural exports. Kenya spends more than they earn on the products they sell. This widens the development gap as the balance of trade is more in favour of the richer MEDCs, and most trade exists between MEDCs. So Trade balance is the difference between imports and exports. The development gap exists due to trade because quite often poorer countries export low income goods but import high income goods, such as Kenya. But countries like Japan, they use their fairly high but lower income imports to produce their higher income exports. So coffee and other agricultural products have world prices that fluctuate dramatically. Producers can really struggle when prices are low. Manufactured commodities like TVs have relatively stable prices by comparison, which is another example of how trade is stacked in favour of MEDCs. NICs are newly industrialised countries. Examples include South Korea, Mexico, Singapore and Taiwan. These have industrialised rapidly and now earn huge amounts from trade. 50 years ago, they were not particularly developed. Famous brands such as Samsung and LG come from Korea. In fact, these companies are now transnational companies, which are TNCs. Rich countries want to keep the balance of trade as it is, and they employ protectionist policies to do this. Essentially, they create barriers to protect their own jobs and industries through what is called tariffs and quotas. Tariffs are taxes paid on imports. They are added to make them appear more expensive than the domestic competition. And quotas are precise limits on the quantity of goods that can be imported. Beyond these quota levels, huge taxes will be added to these imports, making them more expensive. Trading groups are where countries group together to increase the amount of trade between them and the value of trade. These can promote more trade between member countries, but those outside of the group face quotas and tariffs to get their produce to these areas. Ghana produces cocoa beans, however the EU has high tariffs on processed cocoa products from Ghana. It has no penalty on the import of raw cocoa beans from Ghana, because they want to protect their own producers of chocolate products by providing them with raw materials at a low cost. But preventing Ghana from getting any of their processed products in, unfortunately, means maintaining the development gap. The WTO, trading groups have helped member countries, but often penalised other countries. The World Trade Organization deals with rules of global trade. It tries to make trade easier and remove any barriers preventing it. It also settles trade disputes. In theory, they are against any barriers to trade, such as subsidies, where money gives money to farmers to help them, as rich countries can afford to do so, whereas poorer countries can't, i.e. unfair trade. However, the USA and the EU still spend massive amounts on subsidies, which means their producers can produce huge amounts of food. This food is often then flooded onto the LEDC's markets, where the LEDC farmers cannot compete on price. Fair trade. Producers group together in poor countries to produce food for the fair trade market. Such products have a logo. I think everyone knows the fair trade logo. If you don't, then yeah. This shows consumers the product as fair trade. The prices tend to be a little higher, but consumers know that they have produced a fair price for the product. They also paid a fair trade premium, which is spent on community projects to improve the quality of life. Cooperatives. This is where producers group together and take a share of the profits. By grouping together, they are able to share resources, which enables them to compete on price. For example, the Guantanamo Coffee Cooperative in Uganda has 3,000 farmers that have grouped together. They process beans themselves and use shared warehousing facility where the beans are milled before being exported. By doing some of the processing by sharing the milling factory, they are able to make more profit. So, poor countries are in debt. Countries have got in debt because in the 1970s, international banks lent large sums of money to poorer countries to build expensive infrastructure projects like dams and power stations. 10 years later, interest rates had more than doubled. This increased the amount of money which poorer countries had to find to service the loans. Therefore, they needed to pay back the original sum plus the crippling interest. Many countries could not pay their debt, so the unpaid interest was added to the original loan amount. The debt grew further. In return for the reorganising the debts to make them more manageable, the banks expected the government of the indebted countries to cut spending. In Uganda, for example, the biggest cuts were to healthcare and education. Things like that are vital for future development. To reduce this debt, well, in July 2005, the Live 8 concerts were aimed to try and help the Make Poverty History campaign and cancel world debt. For a few days later, the G8 met and an agreement was made to cancel all debts worth $40 billion owed by 18 highly indebted poor countries, HIPCs. The HIPC are a group of the 38 poorest countries. Eventually, $85 billion was cancelled, but $300 billion still remained in Africa. In order to have debts cancelled, the countries had to agree to show they could manage their finances and were not corrupt, agreed to spend money they would have spent on debt repayments on education, healthcare and reducing poverty. It made a large impact, and it had a very positive impact on Uganda. Before cancelling debt, the population using an improved water source was 44%, but after it was 60%. And before cancelling debt, 24% of the population were undernourished, but after it was 19%. Before cancelling debt, 1.5% of the GDP was spent on education, but 5.2% was spent after. And the adult literacy percentage increased by about 10%, from 56.1 to 66.8. And the percentage of income from exports spent on debt repayments decreased from 81.4% to 9.2%. There's an interesting concept called conservation swap or debt for nature swaps, and this tackles debts but also benefits nature. A country which is owed money from another country cancels part of the debt in exchange for the debtor's country agreement to pay for conservation activities. The NGOs, which are non-government organisations like the WWF, often help arrange swaps. These are the debt to nature swaps in Peru. In 2002 and 2008, Peru and the USA agreed to swap debt worth $40 million. Peru agreed to conservation activities to preserve more than 27.5 million acres of endangered rainforest. The forest provides rare habitats for jaguars, pink river dolphins and other species. If debt isn't cancelled, this has quite a big impact on the environment. In Honduras, 800 kilometers square of rainforest is cut down every year to be replaced by ranches, banana plantations and small farms. The connection is that the trees provide hardwood that is sold overseas for foreign money to repay the debt. The new fruit plantations also earn money to repay debt. In fact, 20% of the money Honduras earns is spent on debt repayments. Aid is when a country receives help from another country or an organisation such as an NGO to help it develop and improve lives. Aid can be delivered in a number of ways. For example, emergency supplies, engineers, doctors, nurses, and giving money in the form of grants or gifts or loans which have to be paid back. There's long-term, short-term and tied aid. Short-term aid is coping with the immediate problems caused by natural disasters such as the Haiti earthquake. This type of aid often depends on people responding to particular emergencies and donating money to organisations like Oxfam. Long-term is sustainable long-term aid, and it can prevent emergencies from happening in the first place. For example, providing deep wells to reduce the effects of drought in the future or immunising people against disease. Tied aid is a condition of the aid, might be the recipient has to spend the aid money on the donor's country's products. The donor is the country or the organisation giving the aid, the recipient is the country receiving the aid. So there's bottom-up development and top-down development. Bottom-up development. Experts work with local communities to identify their needs. Much of work is done by NGOs such as Farm Africa, and local people have control over improving their lives. Technical experts help with projects. Bottom up is a localised approach. For example, my school's work with St John's School in Corricotcho with the help of CAPOD. They really are like just, letting the world know. Oh God. Top-down development. All decisions about development projects are made by national governments or large organisations. The development projects are often large-scale across the whole country, for example, improving healthcare or education. The projects often involve huge sums of money. Outside experts help plan the development. Local people have no direct involvement in decision-making. Top-down is when a large-scale project is completed, for example, vaccinations of all children in the country against a particular disease. Aid can lead to sustainable development. Well, sustainable development is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Farm Africa and Moyo Pastoralist Project. The project is helping communities in northern Kenya to survive by reducing their dependence on their animals for all of their income. The project is helping communities to form local development communities, LDC, which finds problems and solutions, for example, improving access to markets so that farmers can sell produce more easily. Helping families to adapt the way they manage crops, for example, animals and forests, to improve their sustainability, which avoids deforestation, which avoids the soils. Providing a small-scale loan set up in alternative businesses, such as small shops, and training people to identify clean, safe water sources and to dig wells. Saku, a local woman, applied to the LDC for a small loan. The money was used to set up a small shop, and she can now afford the essentials such as healthcare, education and food. She has now paid the loan, so the money can be lent to someone else. Trade or aid. We're very good at providing aid after a major disaster, but governments can be less generous. The UN set a target that every year richer countries should give 0.7% of their GDP to poorer countries. Not many countries meet this target, but this isn't really very much of a GDP. It's like 0.7%. I think MEDCs can live without 0.7% of their money, to be honest. However, in the long term, trade is much better than aid at helping poor countries develop. Trade creates jobs which provides wages that people can spend on improving quality of life. So the next part is about contradicting development in the EU. So the EU was originally set up in 1957 to achieve economic and political cooperation after the Second World War. The number of countries has grown dramatically in the last decade, and there are now 28 member states. The EU is a very rich region, but there's still a big gap between its richest and poorest. The richest include areas like London, Brussels, Hamburg. Luxembourg is the richest country and more than 7 times richer than Bulgaria or Romania, which are the poorest members of the EU. So a comparison between the UK and Poland. Well, the UK is part of the EU's core or centres, such as regions. Such regions create the most wealth and have large populations. They produce and consume most goods and services and have the best accommodations. The UK joined the EU in 1973 and is rich, however 14% live in poverty. The global recession has meant that we have a trade deficit. 351.3 billion exports and 473.6 billion imports in 2010. The GNI per capita PPP is $36,130 and the HDI rank is 21. Employment structure 1.4% agriculture, 18.2% industry and 70.4% services. Poland, however, is on the periphery or edge of the EU. Such countries have poorer populations and poorer communications. Belonging to the EU has helped them develop. Poland joined the EU in 2004 and it used to be a communist country. 17% live in poverty. Hundreds of thousands of Polish migrants came to the UK to find work after joining the EU. The trade deficit in Poland is $134.7 on exports and $141.7 on imports. Their GNI per capita PPP is $17,310 and the HDI rank is 41. So it's 20 higher or lower, however you look at it, than the UK. Basically, it's worse ranked. The employment structure, 17.4% are in agriculture, 29.2% are in industry, and 53.4% are in services. So as you can tell, the employment structure is a lot that of a less developed country than the UK's, which is obviously a more developed country. The EU's regional policy. Well, this policy transfers resources from richer to poorer areas. Between 2007 and 2013, regional spending will have used up 36% of the EU spending, which is $350 billion. The focus is on countries in Central and Eastern Europe, like Poland. The money comes from three sources: the European Regional Development Fund, which pays for general infrastructure; the European Social Fund, which pays for things like training and job creation programs; the Cohesion Fund, which covers environmental and transport infrastructure projects, as well as the environment of renewable energy. You have to be a country with living standards less than 90% of the EU's average quality for this funding, so Poland qualifies. So that is the end of development. Yay!